Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another installment of Scott's Selections here for March 23rd for Saturday. Yeah, a lot of stuff happened yesterday with regard to March Madness. You ever get those feelings where the initial bets or the initial things you need to go your way don't go your way, and you immediately assume that the rest of the day is going to be a complete waste of time as you lose everything else? I thought that's what was going to happen to me, as I had Cincinnati, as everybody knows, my bracket in my Sweet 16, and they proceeded to lose immediately to Iowa, even though the game was in Ohio and they had an 11-point lead in the first half. So they lost, and I kind of thought that my day was not going to go well. And then everything turned with the play of the day with UC Irvine, which won, which brings our record on this show to 12-3 for about 7.8 units, with all lines at -110 here at Scott Selections with StatSalt.com. Now, for that game, I recommended the +4.5 in, for the show, just for the -110 line. I did encourage people to take the money line on UC Irvine, and I actually doubled down on the UC Irvine money line in two separate parlays of mine. And if you even paid attention into the comment section in the last video, I actually gave a shout out. I believe it was Jeff who asked me a question on what I thought about the Liberty game, because I recommended Liberty to upset Mississippi State in my bracket, and I told him that I liked Liberty to pull off the upset as well. So I went from having Cincinnati in my Sweet 16 to lose to Iowa in Ohio directly to multiple parlays with Liberty money line and UC Irvine money line, and I ended up making about 40 units of profit, which is actually statistically the most profitable day I've ever had. So it's kind of crazy how quickly, your fate can turn in gambling just on any given day or just over a small period of time. But that's the past. We're still 12-3, but the one thing better than 12-3 would be 13-3. So we will be looking at the card, and the selection we were going with you is actually the early game on Saturday between LSU and Maryland, and we are actually going to be going with the LSU Tigers -2 against Maryland, and it's currently at -110 at Bookmaker. I see there's more people coming in. Welcome everybody. You didn't really miss anything. I was kind of just ranting about the Liberty and UC Irvine moneyline parlay that I had that actually worked out quite nicely. But overall, that's the past. You're not interested in that. We're just going to move forward and try to get you more profit on this Saturday. So the LSU -2 versus Maryland's the early game. The game is on a neutral site in Florida. Traveling is not an issue because this is the same venue that they played their first round matchups in, where LSU ended up beating Yale and where Maryland ended up beating Belmont. Both games kind of came down to the wire. And overall, yeah, thank you, Don. I appreciate that. The pick I could not have gone any better than I hoped it would have. But just to recap, both teams on their season, LSU is 27-6, and they're 16-2 in conference play, where Maryland is 23-10, and they are 13-7 in conference play. Now for some trend support LSU here. The Tigers are 4-0 ATS in their last 4 games against the Big Ten. They're also 8-1 ATS in their last 9 games versus a team with a winning percentage above 60%. LSU is also 8-2 ATS in their last 10 Saturday games, whereas Maryland, they are 1-7 ATS in their last 8 NCAA tournament games, including the first-round game against Belmont, where they failed to cover by a point. And Maryland is 1-4 ATS in their last 5 neutral site games. Now, the main reason I usually provide a statistic between these teams, but it doesn't really matter because it's a conflicting styles approach, where LSU is significantly better than Maryland at offense, but Maryland's better than LSU at defense, so they kind of cancel out. But the main thing that I want to talk about here is everybody's discussion over the absence of LSU's head coach and how the interim coach isn't that great. Now, do I believe that that's also true? I definitely think the interim coach is worse than Wade as, the backup coach and stuff like that. However, people don't know this, but Mark Turgeon, who gets a lot of credit for what he's done at Maryland over the past few years, made the Sweet 16 maybe once or twice. Overall, though, there is one statistic that he has here, which I have to share with you because this stuff is kind of unheard of. So earlier this season, Maryland ended up beating Iowa on the road, and they won by like 1 point. Iowa was ranked at the time, and Iowa ended up winning today, so that's a solid team. Before that game against Iowa, which was somewhere within the last month or so, Maryland's coach, Mark Turgeon, was 0-19 on the road against ranked opponents since he took over the Maryland job in the 2011-2012 season, which means that since 2011 to 2019, he is currently 1-19 on the road versus ranked teams. Now, I know that this game is not a road game per se because of the fact that this game is in a neutral site, so it doesn't really apply. But I think the point that I'm trying to make is that Maryland, when they're not in front of their home fans on their home court, they tend to drastically get outperformed by teams in the upper echelon of talent. And LSU entered the tournament as a borderline top 10 team, let alone a ranked team. And I simply just think LSU has too much talent for Maryland to overcome. And Maryland, they did win against Belmont. They did rally. They were down late in the second half. But could we just acknowledge the fact that Maryland really only won that game because they had two separate 6'11" guys in Smith and Fernando, and Belmont had one center who was 6'9" and nobody else who could rebound on the perimeter? I mean, I feel like that kind of shows that Maryland got pretty lucky with the matchup itself that they were given. I know Windler went off for about 35 and 12, and I get that. But Belmont simply just didn't have the size to compete with Maryland in the paint. And Maryland was just able to give the ball to Fernando and Smith every single possession. And Belmont had no answers. Overall, Maryland's guards in that game, Ayala was pretty good. But their leading scorer, Cohen, went 3 for 18 from the floor. He's extremely inefficient. And LSU has the big men and the size to match up with Maryland with Reed and Bigsby. All four of the big men that I mentioned before in both teams are about 6'10", 6'11". So Maryland will not have that height advantage. Now, whether Fernando's better than Reed is kind of a toss-up. I think Fernando might be a little bit better. I definitely think Bigsby is better than Smith. But overall, those two big men on both teams kind of cancel each other out. But in terms of guard play, LSU definitely has the better guards between these teams. If you compare Cohen to Waters, it's not even close. Waters is a significantly better point guard, and he will be, if he decides to declare, he will definitely either be a first-round pick or an early second-round pick, I should say, where Cohen's probably not even willing to make the NBA. Waters is tremendous. He can shoot it from the outside. He's very unselfish, and he's willing to get his teammates involved. He's great. So I don't think Cohen will be able to guard him. Not to mention the fact that you also have Skylar Mays on LSU, who's really solid as a two-guard. Very crafty. You saw a couple of moves with Yale with some Euro steps and some spin moves. He's really good. And you also have Smart off the bench for LSU as a very powerful sixth man. I simply just think that LSU overall is definitely the more talented team. I know that people are concerned with LSU's coach and the fact that LSU kind of took their foot off the gas late in the game against Yale. But overall, I think we can agree that this spread seems extremely low considering the talent level of these two teams. And considering the fact that Mark Turgeon, when he's not at home against ranked teams, is practically abysmal. So based on that, I think this spread realistically should be somewhere around 4 or 5 for LSU, just based on pure talent. And the fact that it's a 2 for me doesn't really make much sense. I think that 4 or 5 is reasonable on a neutral, maybe even a little bit more. But LSU is favored by 7 against Yale, so I'd say they should be favored around 3.5 to 4 or 5 against Maryland. I don't get 2. 2 doesn't make any sense to me. It was at 1.5 earlier on. It went up to 2.5, and now it's down to 2. I don't really get the buyback money. I don't really care about the buyback money. I think LSU, as long as they don't take their foot off the gas, they should win this game by at least 7 to 8 points with the late fouling. But that is going to do it for this installment of Scott's Selections for March 23rd on Saturday. I've had a great time so far providing content, as we are currently on a 12-3 run with this show, looking to try to make it 13-3 with the LSU Tigers. Hopefully, all your brackets are not busted. We had a nice resurgence just on day 2 with my bracket, as Buffalo definitely looked the part of a potential Final Four team, but that remains to be seen. Either or, I'm not going to keep you guys waiting. Have a good day, everybody, and good luck to you and your bets.